Welcome to From Pixels to Celluloid, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of video game adaptations.
Well, hello there, ladies and gents and fellow people of the world. This is From Pixel to Celluloid, a podcast about video game adaptations. I am one half of your host for today, the Hypersonic 55, and my wonderful friend from the other side of the planet. Can you introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, it's Vincent. I write for video games and stuff. I write for onemore.game.ph, and on my spare times, I like podcasting with Kurt. So I'm here.
And mate, it's been fun. I knew that we had a good rapport when we did that podcast episode. I think it was about film fandoms way back when. And when it came to doing podcasts about video game adaptations, you were one of the first people I thought of to go about and bring you into the fold. So I've been enjoying this fun little journey we've been on so far.
Well, this year has been crazy for video game adaptations. It's almost like every other month. Like I remembered last year, like the moment it hit June, it's just like. Then Fallout 2 came out, season 2. And here we are.
Yeah, I mean this year in particular, it's fairly front ended. Straight from the time January came around, we had at least a few to deal with. Not only with two new movies, but we are still dealing with the tail end of Fallout. And then towards April, you had the start with Mario, and then into May, we've had Devil May Cry, and now Backrooms as well. And I forgot about Exit 8 in between there, which is crazy. So it's just been a very chunky time of like adaptations. And while they've sort of varied in quality depending on who you talk to, I mean, oh crumbs, we even had Mortal Kombat 2 that literally just came out in the last couple of weeks. Christ, I'm not even here, man. The sun has been slowly frying my mind over here in the southeast of England. So yeah, not great, but as you can tell, a lot of adaptations have been happening, and we still have more to discuss. So in this episode, it will be primarily focused on Backrooms, as that's the newest release that's literally just come out. Vincent saw it just before I did, and I saw it yesterday at the time of the recording. So that was opening night for me, and I think you would have seen it like you said. I saw it on Thursday, right? So was it like a midnight screen, or was it like a Thursday night preview?
Well, it's supposed to be a midnight screening, really. Like I'm in Pacific time, and center of the universe is in the east. So when it turns 9, it's technically the next day, or maybe since I watch it at 7:10, that's probably Atlantic time, where it's closer to midnight. So it's technically the next day. So technically, it is a midnight screening, screened just way before my bedtime for us elder millennials, basically elder gods at this point. And back in my day, when we did like midnight screenings, we actually went on midnight.
That's fair. But yeah, we're going to be doing our general impressions of the movie, like a spoiler free section, and then we'll be doing spoilers because this film has a lot that you really can't talk about without going into spoiler territory. So we'll obviously give you an indicator when that comes along. And Vincent will also be sharing his thoughts on Exit 8. And then we'll be having a section towards the end where we'll be talking about Backrooms, Iron Lung, and probably going back to the upcoming Resident Evil, because I think we'll have some thoughts just based on some of the horror stuff that we've had in the video game space so far, and what the final horror video game adaptation will look like towards September, and how much is riding on that. I mean, we've talked about it before, but yeah, probably we'll touch on it one more time.
Yeah, we just can't stop talking about that Resident Evil trailer, right? It's so divisive. Like it actually popped out during the back room screening that I'm in, and like since it is a midnight screening, we have a bunch more talkative audience. And like, yeah, you hear a lot of groans, and you're like, oh, how's that gonna work? What's gonna happen? Like I haven't seen weapons yet. Like, oh my god, okay, cool, yeah. Well, I haven't seen Backrooms yet, and we'll watch it in about 5 minutes. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we'll get into it with Backrooms. Before we get into the review, how did you come across Backrooms? Because the interesting thing for me is I never knew about its creepypasta origins. Much like Slender Man, I only became aware of it once it became a video game. At least the early set of video games that was dropping, I think around like what when I started seeing Slender Man, I think it might have been like what 20 between 2012 and 2014. I want to say closer to 2014. And then obviously they made that movie, which was garbage. But the problem was by the time that came out, it was how many years too late, and there was nothing there. But I think I'd seen bits and bobs about Backrooms here and there. I'd seen the first found footage film that the director of the big budget film had made, and it's an effective short. Like if you only just watch that one, it's just shy of I think 10 minutes long, but it's creepy, it's atmospheric, it has a lot of the DNA that they brought into the big movie version. But I was like, okay, having seen that one short, because I didn't want to watch the rest of the other ones, I was like, okay, let me just get a taste for what this is. It's an impressive thing, and I read a little bit about the origins of the creepypasta and how interesting it sounds on paper. So yeah, that's how I found out about it. Like Vincent, how did you come across it?
Well, just the same way as everybody else, you know how like internet lore happens, right? With the like Slender Man and that type of thing. With back rooms, you scroll around, and somebody posts something pretty creepy, like to the point where internet lore kind of bridges that weird liminal space between urban legend and actual internet bullshit that's like created by everybody, like thinking it's like, oh, it's like some sort of like real creepy curse that's happening, right? Like especially during us elder millennial side of things, like back in the old days, where you like, all you really had was Snopes.com to like verify like if it's real or not. And I guess back in our day, like the when like misinformation isn't that insane as it is in the last few years, where you kind of keep it in the back of your head, and then when you go, oh, that's not true, okay, that's cool, or oh, that's real, oh, that's okay, like you just, it's not like that important, it's not in the forefront of your mind, but it does its job with its like really creepy analog undertones, right? So for me, yeah, that's basically like how Backrooms was. Like I may have come across like with the short films and whatnot, but like for me it's more of like those things that you pass by and go, oh, that's creepy, and then okay, what's the next cat video, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it did its job. And once it once the trailers came out, it's like, oh, like, yeah, like but I also remembered like reading in Variety like a few years ago that Kane Parsons was picked up for the project, and it's like, oh, that's a thing, and then then it just gets filed away into the stuff that you don't care about until, ooh, like a trailer came out. That's cool, you know. But yeah, I am familiar with the short films. I am familiar with the games that came out in Steam. Never really played it, so just kind of like, I didn't come across this film completely fresh, like Iron Lung, for example, or
Yeah.
even Exit 8. Like Exit 8 like was completely new to me. Like so I have some idea of it, and I have some idea of like certain bits and bobs of like how it worked. Like it's kind of intuitive, like just working with that all that knowledge that the internet lore has given me, right? And kind of like something also blends in with like SEMP, that type of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, that's basically what you get for wading through all the brain rot that's in our internet these days.
That's fair. So yeah, straight up, I will say in terms of like general impressions, I enjoyed Backrooms quite a bit. It was similar to what I expected it to be, again, coming out of that first found footage film that I saw, I think about a month or two ago. I think it was around a month ago now. But it was just as eerie, strange, and compelling as I would have hoped. But there was also a lot of extra stuff that they implemented into this film that I didn't expect, because with at least the short film, there wasn't much in the narrative department. There wasn't much going on in the character department. So this film sort of developed a whole extra chunk of stuff for the feature. And I feel like that worked. It definitely takes some time for the film to get going. And I wouldn't describe it as slow. It's more so just that it's laying the foundation. But once the momentum starts, the film really gets going and it just evolves, gets more layered, and just gets stranger. Again, I have to be very careful with my choice of words at the moment, but I found it very compelling, especially from the direction, the set design, just the way the whole thing is designed. And there's a lot of questions about what is, how is, and why is everything in this damn film. But I find that intriguing. And it's not in that way where you're just like, okay, I'm unsatisfied by what I'm being given. I'm actually compelled to want to know more. And it's vague in a way where it's like, I'm not sure if this film is going to supply me with answers, so I may have to fill in the gaps myself, but it's that sort of endless possibilities of what this could be that I found very fun. Well, fun is probably not the choice of word. It's like creepy yet like, entertaining. So yeah, that's my general impressions. How about you?
Well, one thing that's like that really is eye-catching about the film, I really want to compare it to Sinister, like the first Sinister, Scott Derrickson's film, the one who made Black Phone, where the mixture of the analog footage, the analog horror, really gets takes it to a different level when you start filming it with the high eight camera from kind of like a prosumer camera that they used to film those like weird ads like in the 90s, right? Like
Mm.
it really takes me back, like that whole 1990s vibe, right? Like the whole late night TV networks. And yeah, it's kind of crazy like how that just like brings you back. And but I think the most effective part is that whole home video aspect of it, right? It's creepy because it's something about how those home movies, it's different from say watching a clean cut of a film. That is a film, and then your brain kind of runs into either like 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, where you just you enter this liminal state of like a suspension of disbelief while your brain still thinks it's kind of real. Whereas like a high eight film, you know that it's real, like it's something that you filmed, it's something that somebody else filmed, somebody from the real world, not this Hollywood magic, right? It's unedited, it's unfiltered. I guess that's what that's what like Blair Witch Project and even like Cannibal Holocaust, the grandfathers of the found footage genre, come to life, because like your brain thinks it's real. And I think those are the most effective parts of the film, where you're like, oh, like the sheer terror, the sheer anticipation, the sheer anxiety of what's going to happen, right? Like it's you're in a liminal space, literal liminal space, where like you don't know what the hell's going on. And then you don't know what to expect. And it's just how creepy like all this blank space, all this white space gives you, right? And then there's also like dark spots where you're like, what's lurking in the corner? So like those are like the best parts of the film. The actors did a really good job with what they're given, right? Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reigns, Norwegian actress, like Mary and Clark, Clark and Mary. They're the big standouts of the film, I would say. They're really fantastic, and when they take the screen, they really eat up the scenery. And once face to face, these two actors, both prominent in their own right, they're great playing off each other with the real bombastic take of Chiwetel Ejiofor, and the more nuanced take of Renate. Mary's character really comes into light, and I think those were the best like parts of the film. Yeah, and just mirroring what you said, the whole exploration aspect kind of gets, I wouldn't say tedious, but like they do take their time, a bit too much time, where you're like, okay, what's going on next? Whereas if once it's back into the analog horror bit, that's when like what's going on. There's this anxiety with like the way the camera is moving, with you're in the shoes of the cameraman, and the whole home video aspect of it. You don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know what's coming on next. I think that's what pushes the anxiety. Whereas like when you go back to the clean type of film, you're kind of back to safety. I would say there's like this bit of safety when it's back into the clean like digital world, even if the setting is 9090, like it is shot like digitally. So yeah, there's that. So my thoughts.
Appreciate it, man. Honestly, I feel like that's as far as we could probably go without going into spoiler territory, because there are elements of this film once you're in the back rooms, certain things appear, certain aspects become clearer, and there is an appearance that if I was to even mention the person, I think that would raise a few eyebrows. So that's why I want to get into the spoiler territory now. But um, for the time being, I'll just say, yeah, I think. Would you say that overall you enjoyed your time with this one?
Well, like I did enjoy like what I experienced. I really liked learning more about the world, learning more about like every aspect of it, like just trying to solve the mystery that's quite unsolvable, like I think the thing with these types of movies is there's this delicate balance between having that mystery, sort of like the X-Files, right? You can't give too much away, nor can you delay giving enough information. Because what happens is, like as I said, like during the exploration bits of it, we need to know more. There's this weird give and take. There's this weird tug of war between your interest and like, okay, too much mystery, or don't give too much because like you don't want to break the magic, right? It's a really delicate balance, and like they I think for the most part, Kane Parsons did his job well. Where I would say like the only trade off is it just takes a little bit more time to get to where he's trying to lead us to, right? So I would say, yeah, like I don't know if they shaved off a few more minutes, if it'll be different, or maybe if they shave off a few more minutes, like it'll feel like the balance will tilt to the other side, where okay, you've given too much of the magic, right? I think like for the balance part, like he did tread a really delicate line, and I think he succeeded in doing so.
And yeah, I totally agree for the most part. I would say Kane Parsons, it's really cool that he was able to come from the short films and work on this, because you can tell that he has a very clear understanding of what this is, how he wants to move through this space and demonstrate to the audience what this sort of strange experience is. And I'm very curious to see what he does next as a director, because I feel like he's got a lot of cool ideas, and he could probably do really well in the horror space going ahead. Even though this one leaned more in the psychological direction, I feel like he'd still have a pretty good hand and doing more. And he's so young, so yeah, I'm very curious to see what he'd do with follow up movies.
Yeah. Like yeah, as you said, one thing that he really works well with, being the person that actually like popularized the genre, right? Popularized the whole idea of the back rooms. Like he didn't start the lore, but he's the one that really brought it to the forefront with the short films and whatnot. I guess also with just having that knowledge with the source material, being really deeply ingrained with the source material, I would say that's what made him stand out as the best person to pick for this project. I would say even compared to like Markiplier, right? Like I think Markiplier is really he really knows the source material. He's really like married to the work. But at the same time, I think it also kind of doesn't make him the best kind of person to tell the story to. Like I would say, like he would be there, but like somewhat there's he needs to have a little bit more detachment. And I would say like Kane Parsons is like, since he didn't really start the lore, but he knew the source material really well, I would say
Mm.
like he had a bit of a detachment to the point where like there's a certain point where I was like, wow, like I thought to myself, wow, this director knew like really knew the assignment, and he really like submitted the assignment really well. And I go, but wait, what am I thinking? You know, like it's like the artist where you knew that he did like some he submitted something great, but like you weren't seeing the work, you weren't seeing like the like how the sausage is made. It just he just submitted something that was good. It's just like it really feels like a well adapted film, even though like once you know the nuance behind the work, like he really knew the work, but he really also knew how to do his job as a horror director. So like I really mirror your statement where like he has a future in the horror space, right? Like he will
Mm.
be doing a lot of good work, so long as he doesn't pull a Josh Fantastic Four guy. Anyway,
God.
but one thing is like he really knows how to use all that empty space, because even not just with the back rooms, that whole suburban 90s, like I don't know, Southern California nightmare, like stuff that David Lynch always like writes about. It's different when you're in the 90s and you're in like Southern California. I was always there because my cousins lived in Southern California, and like the most backwater like tumbleweed tech type of towns, and it's just there's nothing to do, and there's a lot of empty space. And then you go into one of these goddamn furniture shops, and you're just like, there's just like creepiness. Like, what if I get lost here? Even though like there's really not a lot of hiding spots, but it's just this blank space. It's just like devoid of life, which is basically like, sorry to say, if if you're listening and you're living there, you're like now you have the internet to like bide you over, but like in the 90s where you only had cable TV, it's not fun. Oh my god, it's like, yeah, like I could like imagine that anxiety as a kid and as an adult. Like imagine if you're an adult and you're there and going through a divorce or going through a traumatic, like getting through a traumatic childhood, which is what these characters are going through, right? Like you're just like, "Ugh." And then you come across this space, and I just love how the script, like they're trying not to say backrooms. They're just when they're trying to like describe where they're at. We're in the it's like an office. I'm just waiting for them to go, we're in the back rooms, just
Well,
just
like a Will
waiting for
Smith sort
like
of
just
Suicide
waiting
Squad
for like
situation.
a situation where they say that, and you're just like, just I don't know if you'll just get a laugh from the audience, because it just feels like a fourth wall break at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, but I could see that like the actors are just trying not to say backrooms. Just like, don't say backrooms. Just please don't say backrooms. But you're also like waiting for them to say it. You're just like, come on, just say it. Just say it. I know you want to. What do you mean office space? It's a back room.
Or you could just be super casual about it, like in Rogue One, where they're just like, "Oh yeah, what's your name?" It's like Rogue One. There you go, bam,
Yeah,
name of the movie.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess we'll jump into the spoiler territory now. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen the film, come back and then listen to this, or if you have, stick around because we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of this film. But yeah, just to start off with this movie again, I wasn't expecting it to be focused on these two characters who had two very noticeable, like what, two notable life related issues that come to the forefront of the film as you get into the depths of the backrooms, because it's a very character focused thing that eventually gets implanted in the backrooms, because the backrooms, as we later discover, can take on the aspects of the real world and people that have been in there and then sort of populate it with elements of it. And it's just like, what? It's so funky and strange. Obviously, with Chiwetel Ejiofor's character, the fact that he went through this I'm not sure if it was a divorce or if it was just a breakup with the woman he was with in that movie. But he is a failed architect and owns this furniture store, and he's just not in the best place at the moment. But then once he discovers the Backrooms, there is this whole new world and new life for him to discover. But then you find out that, God, there's so much extra stuff going on with him. Once you find out how he adjusts and comes to terms with being in that place. But then you've got the stuff going on with how would you say her name again, Vincent? Sorry.
Renata, Mary,
Yeah,
Renata
yeah,
Ramsey.
Dr. Mary Klein. She's Clark's therapist in the movie, but you find out she had like some childhood trauma going on with her mother, basically being restricted to being indoors for like a good chunk of her childhood. And again, that plays an element in her adult life. But then once she gets into the back rooms as well, finding out how again that world takes on some of the aspects of her like history, and then obviously seeing how the relationship between Clark and Mary play out over the course of the film and then towards the end is just very interesting to me. Again, because I saw the short film, and the short film, especially the first one, there's not really much in the way of character. It's literally just a dude with a camcorder running around just trying to discover what's going on. And much like Clark, when he steps into the back rooms, there's this intrigue, mystery, and curiousness about like what is this, what's going on. But then ultimately, once you discover something dodgy is going on, and there's danger afoot, it becomes a hunt, and the person's running around just trying to like get out of there. Now this film goes in a slightly different direction, and again it's definitely more psychological and introspective in a way, but I know I'm sort of scrambling all over the place. So yeah, Vincent, like if you could take the wheel with this part.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just going by with what you said, it's just like it's crazy how the misconception is you have two co-protagonists, but it's very clear who the real protagonist is with like how certain characters are being presented. Mary's character is the only character with an actual backstory, and she's also the first one to be really like introduced. But the difference is her interaction with the back rooms is only through her relationship with Clark, whose backstory is you only trust whatever is shown to you. You know, pictures in his room, if you call that a room, his interaction with Mary, his therapist, and what he says. So it makes him like a little bit of an unreliable narrator because you only really have his word to go by, and you can say that like he is going through a rough time. So yeah, like whether it is that he's divorced or whether it is that like his wife kept the house and kicked him out, you know, like we don't know because like you only really have his story. Same with like Mary only really has a story, as she mentions like later on in the film, like I don't know your wife, like I only know like from you, you know, like and you know this guy's going through like a rough patch in his life. Yeah, as he said, he's a failed architect. He has like a failing, I don't know if you'll say it's failing because like it's all on sale, and it doesn't seem like he has a lot on sale. It's all like the empty space in his like furniture shop, and it's just like, you know, and you can see that they're not really well built from that ad where he was like filming an ad and then like that chair just broke.
Yeah.
I don't think he's selling, you know, and then you see like graffiti that says rip off, and they're like all this stuff is like it's a really good exercise in subtext where you know you have this very like charming presentable guy who you can say, you know, like you could probably no, you don't want to have a beer with this guy. Um, you know, like from you're gonna go there, you're gonna buy a furniture and a piece of furniture, and you probably buy it, and it's probably crappy, and then you'll probably never buy it from him again. You know, it's he's kind of like a used salesman where you know very presentable. You're compelled to buy off of him. You're compelled to like you know be polite with him, but you don't really know what he's like. And as you see when the film really takes a turn after you know since he is your introduction to the back rooms, right? But it also makes him like a compelling antagonist because while he is the most interesting character in the room, doesn't mean that he is quote unquote a good guy. From how his mental state just unravels after he discovers the back rooms and is really, really compelled to learn more about the world. So, why he is a very unreliable narrator is even when we are exposed to the scientists that are studying the back rooms, you don't really get a lot of information from them since they are gatekeeping the information for themselves. But the ones who will share what they know about the back rooms is through Clark. Clark is really your unreliable tourist, right? Like your unreliable guide. And if there's really a way for you to learn more about the back rooms just from the state, notwithstanding all the internet lore that's written out there just by this movie alone, the most you can really trust from this movie is from what you watch in the first 10 minutes in the first short film, the first found footage film, because it kind of shows that the rooms do change, but then there are really no rules. It can just randomly change. When he entered that room and then suddenly the door was locked and suddenly he's in a different, like completely different space, right? And that's where the terror happens, right? Like it just changed and you see it happen on his camera, and as it is established, these are home movies that are unedited, right? So at least that you can say that the rooms do change. So Clark's saying that the rooms will change, you can take that as truth because like you've seen it again. But his, I would say, theory of things getting copied, definitely anecdotal, but we don't really have a lot of data. No one else confirmed it. All you can confirm is, yeah, things do get copied. Okay, 70-80% it could be real. The thing where it kind of gets wonky are the, I would call them creatures, furniture
Yeah.
creatures, where they start. There's this concept where certain bits and pieces of people also get copied into the back rooms, which explains the really creepy people that show up. The lamp guy, the lady with like multiple faces, and even like the big bad character, like the actual, like, super spoiler warning, like Captain Clark. Basically, that's your monster, right? That's the thing, which is really nuanced too, right? Because as he says, like when it starts copying people, it doesn't really get people right. So they're either just benign, right? Like the woman or the lamp guy. Yeah, they look creepy, right? But they're mostly harmless, except for the Captain Clark character, where you're going like, what is actually, because like I think what's happening is this is like the real shadow aspect of Clark. Like there is this darkness in him when he drinks, as we can, from what the film shows, just that wanting to inflict violence, which is, that's the only furniture creature that inflicts violence. But I don't know what he even did. Like, did he actually, like, you can see that like from the movie, he killed Clark. The Captain Clark copy killed Clark. So it does have some of its darkness with him, right? And you can see that like it killed the camera guy, and we really don't know what happened. What, like, if Kat, the assistant manager, was killed by Captain Clark or was killed by both of them. At this point, we don't know. But you know that he is capable of inflicting violence and malice, which um, you can see from his actions against Mary. So yeah, it really makes him a fantastic antagonist. So yeah, for sure you can say that the rooms change. You can say for sure that things get copied, but I think what we're trying to get at is it's very divisive ending, right? Like I'll pass it off to you with what you thought of how the film like resolves, because like as you mentioned, like in your impressions, the thing that stops you from basically giving the film like glowing reviews is this very cryptic ending, as you would say. where fans would probably have a better take at it with their understanding of the source material. But with the film as its own source material, it is open to impressions, and you could probably guess what my impression is. But I'll pass it off to you, Kurt. See what you think about it.
You brought up a lot of really interesting points there, especially with that ending. So, obviously, towards the end of the film, we discover that Mary encounters these dudes in hazmat suits that immediately reminded me of one of the covers of the video game. I think it was Escape the Backrooms, where there was dudes in hazmat suits. And I think that's like a co-op game where you could go about and play and interact in the back room. So I was like, oh, they even had those characters in this film, which was interesting. But then you find out there's this secret organization who are recording and observing, I guess, people who have gone into the back rooms because spoiler, obviously we're in the spoiler section, but Mark Duplass from the Creep movies in on Netflix is actually in here as Phil. He's a scientist of the company, was it Async? And they happen to be monitoring the back rooms and just trying to discover what it is. And I guess their whole thing is seeing what happens when people go in and then recording the details. So I guess they're using Mary as a means to just discover more because I guess they only have a certain amount of information, and the only way for them to know more is to send more people in, get their information, and then utilize that as further research. Because Phil is talking to Mary in what I can only describe as not exactly an interrogation, but like an interrogation like scene where they're both in a room sitting across from each other on a table just talking about this sort of phenomenon that is the backrooms, and you can see that he is just enthralled, confused, and enamored by the thing, and he just wants to know more. They talk about the backrooms as this the most fascinating thing in human history, and to a degree I can totally see where he's coming from with that. The backrooms, as like, I guess for lack of a better term, like a pocket universe, is fascinating. And just being in that space, just discovering it when you're not hearing weird sounds in the background or being chased by weird, funky, morphed versions of yourself that look like dodgy caricatures in the most creepy way. It is interesting, but then at the same time, there is the possibilities of getting lost, just seeing all sorts of weird scenery from people who look like they got quicksand into the floor to random rooms that are dimly lit. There was the point where they were using the camcorder earlier on, and the camera guy goes into the bottom of that room, and there's just a bunch of clothes just piled up in certain sections, and you're just like, whose clothes are these? And that's that early portion of the film where you're just like, okay, who's been here before, and what are their fates? Are they alive or are they dead? You know, you obviously assume it's the latter. And then the camera guy, he went about and got real quick, which was strange and scary, but also very impressive that the film decided, you know what, him and Kat, they decided to take them out straight away, which was just insane. And from there, you realize, okay, the Backrooms isn't playing around. There is something very strange and funky going on within this facility. And oh my gosh, just as the film went on, and especially after Mary came in there and she was discovering like the nature of the Backrooms and realizing that Clark wasn't lying, that this is actually a space full of everything that he was talking about, you start to see that, oh gosh, there is a lot going on here. Because once she comes into contact with what's been described as the entity, which in this case is that weird morph version of Captain Clark, seeing her run through the area and then just realizing that there is just so many friggin' rooms, and they're all sorts of different types. Again, you get the sort of main open space that's like well lit and, you know, very sparse of items, but then you've got rooms that have full on like houses, and at least the front part of houses in there. There are places that are super dark, one that looks like a pool with like, small bodies of water. There's places where the perspective gets all warped, and like an early portion with the clock where he was trying to run away from something that was chasing him, and he had to it looked like a room that had like sort of forced perspective, and he had to climb up a wall to enter through a small door. And then going back to when Mary is running away from Captain Clark, there's a point where she crawls through a hole in the wall and then enters into this room with a massive chasm in the middle. But then you've got all these layers underneath with like all these extra rooms, and she has to climb a single, like, very thin flight of stairs to climb up into a warped version of the store that Clark works at. And, towards the front door, there is no outside there. It's just a big wall. And again, while watching the film, I was just continuously fascinated from the perspective of how this all was conceptualized when this film was done. Like, these people had to think about all these different types of rooms, how they connected. And, you go from areas that relatively make sense to, open a door, you'd find somewhere that looked kind of similar. But some of these places are absolutely different. And because of the way the back room sort of warps and puts things, there's doors on ceilings, things on the side. You sort of twist your head one way and you realize, oh, this is actually, doors and rooms to different locations at a different perspective. And I'm just like, shout out to the people who worked on the production of this, because like those areas are super well crafted and they all have a very distinctive feel, especially when it comes to the lighting, the use of color. There's that room with the bloody Christmas tree that was just super eerie and funky. And going back to the moment where Clark and Mary are having that conversation in that room, part of me is wondering, those creatures that are around them, I wonder if these are like people that Clark has sort of projected in there. Because of that lady with the multiple faces with the red hair, she kind of reminded me of the woman he used to be with in that picture. So I was wondering if this is like the backroom sort of taking his memory of the lady that he was with and then just sort of warping her into like whatever that was. And the other people may be people that he may have associated with in his life. Because of, again, the backrooms in terms of how it works is very vague, but it almost seems like whoever's in there, it seems like the backrooms, I'm not sure if it's able to probe their minds, but it's almost like it can take aspects of what their life experience is in terms of people and locations and then just like segment and place it in various different ways. Some of it may be a pretty accurate or at least partially accurate representation of what that thing is in the real world. And there's other times where, you've got cars that are like, at a 45-degree angle, or like buildings sinking into the floor, or crooked, or like weird things. And obviously the people in there, they kind of reminded me of like some weird bad job with AI messing around with, like, is it people's particular like body parts. And it's just like, the backrooms is a very fascinating concept to me. Again, it's the vague element invites you to project your own thoughts as to what it is and how it operates. And it's almost like the backrooms as its own area just feeds off of other people, but you're trying to figure out how it does and how long has it existed and how far does the backrooms go. Because again, from these people at Async, it clearly seems like there are multiple areas for people to clip in from the real world into this location. And where are all these different points and how many different people are in there? And obviously this is based in America, but could there be people from, England, China, Australia, Africa that could have ended up in there? Because there's that weird standee thing that Clark comes across ages ago and is speaking all those different languages. And I do wonder if that's like a sort of I don't know, almost like inviting certain people of various different, like, is it cultures and races to come in there and just like hear something that they're familiar with and then just sort of walk further in just to discover certain things. There's so much possibilities. But anyway, going back to the ending, yeah, you find out that it seems Mary is at least being, I'm not sure if she's being kept, but she's at least being invited by Async to discover more about the backrooms, to understand the nature of it and do expand their research about what it's about. But then the final shot of the movie is after seeing a bunch of different aspects of Mary's history being implemented there in terms of her home location when it was, still fixed up and when it was demolished. You see a version of what I believe to be the entity sat there in a seat with its multiple eyes and fingers looking all creepy and ugly. So I'm just like, it makes me wonder, does the entity take on the characteristics of a single individual each time they enter the space? Because obviously Clark was the main one, but she was able to at least get away / defeat it. But then there was that point where Async were able to bring it into like an operating table or something. So I'm not sure if that version died, or if it can morph into something else, or if it can be defeated or killed. Because when Mary was hitting that thing, it was bleeding. So unlike the weird, I guess, stuffed versions of the creatures that like Clark and Mary was interacting with, well, mostly Clark, because he was the one that took him out and said you could eat him. I was like, please do not eat the contents of that weird man thing with the multiple eyes. And because the way he dropped it on the plate, it made a noise like a wet piece of meat. It was creepy. I did not like that. But yeah, again, going back to the entity, it's just like, okay, what does this mean? Like, can you defeat it, and can it be reborn as another individual? And then is it just one, or are there multiple? Again, these are the questions that this film invites, and I'm very intrigued and just project many thoughts out there. But at the same time, it does make you wonder, okay, is this a satisfying conclusion to this film? I think that will really depend on your investment in this world and how it's presented the information. I'm kind of in two minds about it. On the one hand, I'm like, okay, this sort of invites us to go back to this world for a sequel, but then it also leaves a lot of questions up in the air about how this world works. What was the point? And even with the scientists who give you at least what Phil, the scientist, gives you some context of what's going on, there's still, I don't know, a lack of conclusion, I guess. So yeah, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying like, yeah, I liked it, and I would say I was let down. I was sort of just like, huh, okay, so that's the way it's ending. I guess I'm gonna be theorizing about this, but it's not. It's like this film has an idea, but it's almost not completely fully formed.
Yeah, so basically, like, you don't really get a lot from the film. You get, I think, most of the film's, shock value basically ends about halfway before the switch over to Clark to Mary, right? That's the turn. And some may argue that like the best parts of the film pretty much ended like right there, and then after that it becomes a whole woman in peril type of story where you have Mary also dealing with trauma, having to deal with his her patient, and then like the climax scene with both of them just facing off each other, and then Captain Clark showing up, showing like the shadow embodiment of Clark, and then after that, provide a bit of context, what's really happening with the back rooms. At that point, it invites you. Do you want to stick around? To learn more about, to intrigue you to learn more about the back rooms, because really, there's no real concrete information. As I was saying, you can really only trust the first 10 minutes of the film because that's what you see what's happening with the back rooms. For sure that the back rooms are changing, and to a certain degree certain static objects get copied perfectly. Once you start putting dynamic objects like humans, like memories, that type of thing, it starts to glitch and have different sorts of copies, right? And there's really no rules because they didn't really establish like any rules.
Mm.
Even with the company, the MRI company that does it, you don't really have any rules regarding their end. So whatever they say, it's completely unreliable. But how I see the phenomenon is basically what Phil offered. The phenomenon of the back rooms started within the company building. So that MRI company is already part of that pocket universe, while there is a glitch that connects that building to the furniture shop, right? That's clear. And then you see this room with all of those standees with the recording aspects. Were those created by the company, or were those 3D printed in the back rooms? Because how I see the phenomenon is if an item is static enough, it will make a perfect 3D copy in the back rooms. Whereas like humans with all our moving parts, I don't think it can really copy us like perfectly fine. The only thing that it kind of copied was that mannequin of Captain Clark, mixing in Clark, both of their personalities into that strange mannequin creature, right? And I guess like the essence of Clark got imprinted into that mannequin. So all his darkness, my theory, um, imprinted itself onto it. And since he is sleeping in the building for a certain while, I guess, I don't know, But like it also suggests that that mannequin has always been there. So that pokes holes in my own theory, right? So why is
Mhm.
that creature more hostile than everybody else who are basically benign, right? Yeah. So we really don't know. So I'm hearing around in the theater that like, oh my god, they turned her into a furniture, but we don't know. Like all Phil said is like it's out of my pay grade to tell you what happens to you in the end to Mary, right? So we don't know what happens to Mary. We don't know if they control some portion of 3D printing. Do the people in that MRI company select who gets 3D printed? We really don't know. And then I guess the memory, like the only thing that we could see is like in that ending, they showed all the memories of Mary being 3D printed in their own little way in the back rooms. But since the back rooms theoretically is infinite, there are infinite versions of copies that are in that room. But we don't know even how that works when we interact with the back rooms. The first person who was filming, all it's showing are items from the furniture store, right? That's like really foreshadowing what we're gonna see later on. And we only see four entities, five being the 3D copy of Mary. So we really don't know. It like I think the objective of the ending is to just like pique more interest and engage us to ask more questions to basically convince them and convince the studio to put more money in the sequel so we can watch what happens next. That's the best I can go with it. But like with the information that we have, I could say that like I don't know how many entities are being 3D printed into the back rooms, right? And like we don't know for a fact if the MRI company is connected to the back rooms. Like for sure, right? Like it is an actual like wormhole where the entrance to the furniture store is just a glitch. So, that's what I have. But otherwise everything else is speculation because there's really not a lot of information. But what it made me feel like would I watch a sequel? Sure, like just to pique my curiosity. But they really have to up their game and hopefully answer those questions, but also adding more to the mystery for us to like explore that universe a little bit more, which what kept this internet lore alive, right? I would say. And if they can make that alive in this movie universe, I'd say they would have succeeded. Well, they succeeded with me. I hope that they succeeded with somewhere else. But from what I'm hearing from the audience, I could say that some people are like, this is a one and done, right? So yeah, like I think it's divisive from my anecdotal observation around the theater that I watched in. But like, consider me intrigued. Like, I'd explore more if they have like a sequel, right? And I think that's where they did a good job.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I would say with not only the short films that Parsons has worked on, but also the internet lore and the games as well. There are many different things that they could still utilize on top of like the new lore that they've established in this film. So it's definitely open in a way where you could return to this, but at the same time, you could end this and be the one off, and it probably would still be an effective is it film. And chances are the internet being the internet, if we didn't get like a new feature film, they're probably going to find ways to continue this on their own, and maybe they might even spawn a new set of short films for the internet to tamper with, or maybe some new fan fiction and whatnots. um so yeah, the ball is pretty much in the court of the studio, and also just how much this movie's going to make. But it seems to be making bank already, because from what I can see, it's almost up to 40 million so far. So they did really well with the budget that they had, because again, it was only 10 million. And while obviously this isn't like a super crazy detailed film with elaborate sets and expansive locations where you have to travel to various places or have a massive use of CGI, there was a lot in this film, but they kept it self-contained and made use of visual effects where necessary, but also did a lot with the camera, with the set design, to go about and craft this film in a meticulous manner. Because again, it would be very easy for a lot of these rooms just to be a variation of what you've seen before. And some of them are, but the style of the rooms and the scenarios the characters find themselves in, walking through doors, sort of sliding through tight walls or crawling through enclosed spaces, they did a lot and created a lot of variety. So I would be down to see where they expand. But like you said, they'd have to find a way to expand the mystery in a way that still felt like you were learning and this world was expanding and not repeating what you had before, because you run into the issue of like, okay, yeah, we understand what the Backrooms is. Now you need to do something with it. Yeah, I guess it just depends. There's definitely material that they can work on, and I would be curious to see more of this because Kane Parsons did a good job with this. And I also wanted to shout out the music, which was very suitable for the film. It was like very eerie, droning, unsettling. There was almost something just like off kilter about the music. There was also some use of like what I could only describe as faint voices that were not exactly singing, but almost like a light moaning chant at certain points in the film. And then there was points where the score got a lot more intense. And Parsons worked with I'm not sure how you say his name. Is it Edo or Edo Van Bremen? He's worked on a few films that I've seen here and there. I wasn't super keen on the scores he's done before, but working with Parsons in this one, I thought the score was pretty effective. So yeah, yeah, overall, man, I just had a good time with it. And while there were definitely elements of the film which I think could have been either tightened up or required a little bit more explanation, I think this was definitely one of the stronger adaptations from this year. So yeah, I was keen on it.
But yeah, I think that was the main thing with Backrooms. The rules were not established, so I guess if there's no rules established, there are no rules, and I think that's the biggest thing that keeps the film kind of like mysterious and the horror of it all. Right? If there are no rules, there's no way you can beat it, and that's the aspect of horror. This whole powerlessness. Whereas with films like Exit 8, for example, the rules are established off the bat. So they do have that similar aspect. You know, you go into like a pocket universe. But this one, I would say in Exit 8, the rules are perfectly clear. So if you weren't really, if you didn't know the story about Exit 8, it's a story of a man who's on his way to his pregnant ex at a hospital, gets stuck at the endlessly looping exit corridor of a subway. And the rules are established. You know, you just have to go through each door. If you find an anomaly, turn back, and, you know, until you get to the exit. But if you decide to exit before the actual, you know, the actual turn, that's where things kind of go awry. And creepy things happen, sort of body horrors things happen, and it has to do with like the anomalies they bump into. But basically the same thing as with the games. You know, you have to go from exits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You only have to exit through 8. And those are the rules. They are simple. I would say there are more nuances to the films, and that's what makes it great. As well as certain parallels. Same thing with like Backrooms, right? Like these characters are not the thing that makes these horror great. That they're not just you know, bodies that needs to be disposed of, like in a lot of slasher horror films, right? They're not disembodied humans; they are full humans, and you follow three different characters. The first person who gets lost, the walking man, as they call them, the one that he keeps running into, who's kind of like one of the entities in Backrooms, where they don't even recognize the existence of the other person. And also the missing child that was trapped in that same exit. So the goal is to leave, whereas in Backrooms, the goal is more to explore. And I guess with Backrooms, it's like your main enemy is your curiosity and your own fascination with the area, and that's what kind of dooms you, because you really don't know what the other entities will bring, right? You don't even know if like there's this one hostile entity. Whereas with Exit 8, the real danger is, you don't know what kind of anomaly would get, right? If there's no anomaly, keep going. If there's an anomaly, turn back, right? That's basically the rule. So like I think it they're both kind of parallel themes, the whole looping type of thing. With like, if you are interested, like, I won't really go too much into spoiler territory, but there's a lot of parallels between each character, and there's like a subtle connection between them. Whereas with Backrooms, like the real connection is between Clark and Mary, and how their own traumas and nuances kind of like dictate how they navigate through the back rooms.
Yeah, no, that sounds like pretty interesting. I really wish I'd got around to seeing that damn movie, but it was just so far away from me to go about and check out. But I'm very curious to see what those comparisons are like. And I think for me, one of the interesting things about Backrooms was the idea that, again, it was more of a psychological film focusing on the individuals and how their location affected like what was happening around them. And that's what well, not exactly the same, it sort of reminded me of Iron Lung in the sense that in that film you've had Markiplier's character in that submarine constantly in this tight environment doing this job for a group who say that they'll be able to take time off his prison sentence. But you can see that as he continues doing his job and diving deeper into that, like, sort of river of blood, his psyche is slowly, like, going mad, and his situation slowly gets worse as certain things happen while he's in there. And with Backrooms, you have the whole thing with Clark exploring this situation and things slightly getting worse for him. And then Mary, once she gets in there, things clearly get worse for her. And it's all just about like how they're feeling mentally and how that affects them in the environment and how it just causes things to get a little worse. Now, obviously, again, the nature of how these things are affecting them are very different, but I also found it kind of similar. I don't know if I'm like reaching there, but I found that as like just a small thing that I was reverberating in my mind as I was watching the film yesterday.
Yeah, so that's the thing with the Iron Lung, I would say. Same thing, you go into the world, you are intrigued. It's a lot more claustrophobic, right? With Iron Lung, it's a lot of zoom in shots, a lot of basically stuck in one area. Whereas with Backrooms, it is still one location, but the dynamic of endlessly changing rooms, and just that mystery of discovering bit by bit the moment he goes into a different area with this unseen danger that is coming for him. I think that's what kind of pushed the envelope for Backrooms, I would say. Whereas also the introduction of Mary being a contrast to Clark, where you're stuck with the pilot the whole time, right? With Iron Lung. It's claustrophobic in more ways than one, and then the lack of variety and the lack of context, really. You're only like, that's basically what you see. You kind of get antsy, and you kind of get exhausted, right? Whereas with Backrooms, it's kind of like I watched both films on both long days, but Backrooms kept me engaged a lot more than Iron Lung did, considering that they're pretty much almost, or even like, I think Iron Lung's a little bit longer. Yeah, because they're both intriguing. They're both interesting worlds, but it's just the execution. I would say like Backrooms gives you a lot more to chew on and a lot more to look at. With the introduction of the found footage films, the two characters, the increasingly changing world, I think it's a lot more engaging because you could compare Backrooms to another similarly formatted film, Shelby Oaks. That Shelby Oaks didn't work as well. Like, even with the found footage, the extra story on top of the story, right? In the end, like, execution really makes a big difference, because that's what pulled it off, and also like Backrooms had two talented actors. I mean, like, yeah, Markiplier's like punching way above his weight, and like he did a good job considering the resources that he had. Whereas Backrooms, like they had a lot of Kane Parsons took all the resources that he got and produced like a really engaging story. The ending notwithstanding, some people liked it, some people didn't like it. At that end, even with the resource, which is the sparse lore that he has working for him, right? I guess he was asking, what's a creative direction that I would take it to? Would I continue the mystery or would I answer it? But I guess he chose I'd continue the mystery, and personally, I think that was a better choice in terms of the longevity of the brand. If you just keep the mystery going, just know when to end it, right? It'll come to a point when it becomes a franchise when you're just keeping the mystery alive because that's what keeps the franchise going. It's just the mystery. But once the mystery is answered, because I think that's what this is with the back rooms. Once the mystery is answered, I think that's it. I don't think the people are gonna come back because you've answered it. But he
Yeah.
kept it going, and from a franchise standpoint, I think he did a good job that way. Whether he's gonna make it last 2 3 films or for the next 20 years, that's up to him. That's up to the studio. It's up to the people giving him money.
Fair, fair, yeah. Oh gosh, I just like the fact that we got to see this concept be brought to the big screen in a way that felt faithful, but also was able to create its own sort of new lore on top, as stated before. And it's always fun when you get two actors that are like, just really good at what they do. A couple times, both of them just sort of switched on acting mode, which was really fun. One thing I love about like certain actors where they are in a project where they're acting, but then there's that point where you can see that they just happen to flip a switch and then they're actually just like putting on like an actual crazy good performance for just a short space of time. I look back to Wonder Man earlier on this year when Ben Kingsley, he busted out like one heck of a monologue at one point, and I'm just like, bloody hell, slow down, Ben. Like, you don't have to hit me with such greatness there. We know how good you are, but sometimes it's almost just fun to just remember how good someone can be. They can just like sort of turn it on. And I feel like both of the actors in this film just like had a moment where they were just able to, just show their acting chops in a couple moments, very small but very pivotal moments in the movie. Where I'm just like, yeah, you guys are good. I can see why people like you and why you've gotten the award recognition that you have.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's we were talking about earlier before we recorded like what the trailer gave, right? And I think like the trailer did a great job just hiding how menacing and how actually terrifying the backrooms were. Like what it did was like it caused a lot of intrigue. It's like, oh, that's like there could be an adventure here, but what is lurking underneath all the weird stuff, right? What's lurking underneath with all this? But the thing is, the moment you watch the movie, the menace is already there. The danger was already there, as seen through the first 10 minutes. The first found footage video. Right? There's something there. There's something that you don't like. This is a no go place. Why would you start exploring this place? But yeah, and then you see Chiwetel Ejiofor and how much he's having fun with the movie, and like we discussed kind of earlier, how he had to act acting like a few times. It's just like when he had to do the role play
Yeah.
scene, and then when he had to like film all those like cringe ads, and then you just go like, wow, this guy. You just have to flex throughout the film, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you how it's done. And that's what makes for like good nuance. You really believe, like, you really see the how his character evolves. Like there's a lot of nuances to his character. Like to the point of time, like you trust this guy, right? Like you feel safe with this guy until you're not, until like that turn happens where you see like bits of fractions of his darkness, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
you kind of feel sympathetic towards him in the beginning, right? His wife left him. He wants to be an architect, and he's stuck with a shitty store that doesn't seem to be doing well. And he's trying his best to like just keep the lights on. Literally, like that's basically where like how the conflict starts. Like he's just trying to keep the lights on, like shaving bits and pieces of like what he's gonna pay to keep the business alive, because you don't know, like, is he still paying for his mortgage, is he paying for alimony as well, right? Like he's managing a failing business. You're sympathetic, and then once you see his actual darkness, once the turn happens, when now he's not the protagonist, you're not following him anymore, and you're just following Mary's character, who is undergoing her own trauma and can't seem to connect with this guy. And then you see her frustration when he actually reveals this, and then she's just like, I don't know your wife. Like I'm like what happens when you're not being paid by the hour anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just like, what, like, stop your whining. And yeah, that's the great part about the execution of these actors, and it really gives me hope for Zach Cregger's Resident Evil, actually. Seeing how Kane Parsons, who does know the source material, right, and is tasked to improve upon the source material, because like I really think the lore of Backrooms is kept alive by those who just add on to the lore, right? It's not just Kane Parsons, but like the internet, right? Like it's an urban legend that's being kept alive by the people who contribute. And I would say, like, from this thread, it gives me a little bit more hope that Zach Cregger's taking that Resident Evil lore that, yeah, Capcom made it, but at the same time, I really want to see what he does with it, because like how, trailer notwithstanding, doesn't do like a good job trying to get you into the theater the same way Backrooms got you into the theater. But like I want to see, like, he's trying to like make a case for himself, and seeing what Kane Parsons did with this, and the worst that you can probably get is, well, can get really worse. Like the worst that you can get is like it becomes just a generic horror movie with Resident Evil tagged onto it. I think that's what people are expecting it to play out with what they saw with the teaser trailer. But the best thing that it can get is they can take something like Backrooms, where you take a person who's like very good at their craft, Zach Cregger, and creates a film that's very much Resident Evil, very much understands the assignment, but also, you don't have to have Leon Kennedy, you don't have to have Chris Redfield, you don't have to have Jill Valentine, because I think that's what made Resident Evil 7 great before they actually connected. Well, I'm particularly saying, like, if you're gonna play through Resident Evil and just go through the Zoe arc and not the Mia arc, because why we get stuck with this toxic freaking wife? You go with a Zoe arc and you don't get the introduction of Chris Redfield in the end, right? They called it the bad ending, but I would say it's the best like standalone Resident Evil in the same world without adding on the familiarity of the old Resident Evil. And personally, I thought, because for the longest time I thought that was the canon, right? Oh no, like there's no other Resident Evil characters in this. And then I just saw the DLCs with Chris in it, and I was like, okay, it's connected to the world. But without it, like, I think it stood really well on its own without introducing any other Resident Evil characters. And I think that, if I would, suggest, if that is the vision that Zach Cregger is going for, I think it would do well. Someone as open minded as myself would say, yeah, let's see when September rolls around. I am a lot more optimistic after seeing Backrooms, that somebody of Zach Cregger's caliber can possibly create something good out of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, the horror space is an interesting one with various different levels to it. And again, Resident Evil has a notable history over the last, like, what, close to 30 years, if not 30 years already. And Zach Cregger, with his, like, filmography so far, definitely has a interesting and unique kind of style that he could bring to the franchise. And again, with Kane Parsons, who has come into the space, contributed to the Backrooms, but also created his own unique thing to add to the overall mythology. I was going to say mythos, but then like mythology came out, so that's why it sounded so weird. But yeah, with Resident Evil, I can only hope we get something sort of similar to Fallout, where it's within the realm that people are familiar with, but they're able to carve their own story, but also have it be something that is compelling that people will want to engage with. And then this will sort of become its own sort of pillar within the overall franchise, where the characters, the scenarios, some of the stuff from this film will be remembered and talked about positively somewhere down the line if this becomes like another adaptation franchise, or even if it's just a one-off. We can at least say, oh yeah, you know what, Zach Cregger, he put a spin on it, it was a good time, and it didn't infringe on the franchise, but like, either added to or at least fit within the universe in a way that was satisfactory, as opposed to making you go ugh or roll your eyes.
Hmm. Yeah, that's yeah. That yeah, it is really a juggling act, between marrying concept, production, and execution. Because some films are very executed very well, but probably will not get you into the room because the concept wasn't that strong. And then some films
Yeah.
are really like deep in concept and execution wise, like it can go either way. And as you said, like the horror space is can be a hit or miss, because horror is one of the hardest genres, I would say, to like pull off, right? Because some horror aspects, and like I guess some comedy aspects as well, like work well in their particular medium, and then how it gets monetized, I would say, falls under what kind of medium is the most saleable, right? Like in the literary space, it's the novel. In film space, it could be a movie, could be at least a TV series has kind of like picked up from what it, like I would say in the 90s. Like if you're in TV, people kind of like brush it aside. And then video games, of course, video games, right? $1 billion industry. So, but the problem is when you're trying to stuff a particular genre into an adaptation that probably won't work for the genre, right? Like, I'd say Resident Evil, like this may be a hot take, but I'd say like Resident Evil is perfect for the video game space and stop trying to make it anything else. Because, it is already, as I've mentioned time and time again, they've taken something, a Romero zombie movie, and turn it into an interactive video game, complete with the cheese, the cringe, the intrigue, the mystery, and the lore, and all crafted into one that created this perfect accident that was Resident Evil. And then now they're trying to, retrofit that back into a film, like, okay, fine, like what's that? The samurai film was a, like Kurosawa's way of doing a samurai film was taken from like the cowboy films from the Western. And then when they created the Magnificent Seven, they kind of retrofitted that. They kind of retrofitted like Seven Samurai into the Western feel, and it worked. And it kind of like borrowed off each other. I guess another film that it kind of worked was like The Longest Yard, right, where they took football and then they tried to make it like they made like a soccer version in the British and in the UK, and then kind of retrofitted. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like Resident Evil is one of those things that like stop trying to fit it back into film. Like it doesn't seem to work. But if Zach Cregger is able to do it, doing a completely different thing without using whatever Capcom has established, and if it works, I guess that's the way to do it, right? Like that's the way like an adaptation could work. So yeah. Personally, stop making Resident Evil films. It just doesn't work.
Oh god. I mean, yeah. Again, we'll see what happens with this one. Hopefully, they'll read the room if this does go wrong, and we can actually put it on ice. Because certain franchises have been like left when they didn't do well. I mean, we're talking about a different era now, but if you're looking back at that Prince of Persia when they tried to make that happen back in 2010, like that Disney film did not fare too well. I don't think it was that bad, but I wouldn't say it was like crazy compelling. I'd heard a lot of people just like crap on the movie, so I ended up seeing it, I think, during COVID, and I was like, oh, I can see where this film is going. It's just not landing 100%, but they were able to like say, okay, you know what, we're not going to try another one of those for a while, so one can only hope that they'll just decide to let Resident Evil live just in the world of video games, because it's doing quite fine without any adaptations at the moment. So hopefully that'll be Capcom's mindset, but we'll see. Because again, in this day and age of like video game adaptations showing up left, right, and center, I think a lot of studios, whether they be film or video game, are trying to capitalize on the rise of the good ones in terms of film and TV, and hoping that they will get the magic sauce and those combinations of a good product along with good trailers and good word of mouth that will result in profit, and then again more people getting involved with their video games. So we'll see. Depends on where Capcom's mind are at, if they want to try for more money a second time around, or if they're just like, okay, you know what, we're gonna lick our wounds, chill with Resident Evil for a bit, and maybe somewhere down the line maybe try again, or just not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff in Capcom's long list of library stuff to to work on. But right now they have two films coming up. Like they have Street Fighter and Resident Evil. Their two biggest franchises. Are they gonna add a sequel to Monster Hunter? Who knows?
Man, they're gonna have to start that over, man. I don't want to see no sequels or any of that. They had their chance and they done goofed. So yeah, no, we don't need that.
I'd say like just make Pragmata. Just improve the birth rates of certain places and end the loneliness pandemic with one film, right?
Christ.
Not that like, but right now you have like the films with like basically making the male loneliness pandemic into a horror movie with obsession and companion, and to a certain degree I would even say Backrooms kind of touched on it, right? Like you have this presentable nice guy, right? He's an upstanding guy, you'd meet him, he runs a shitty store, but you'd probably buy a chair off of him. But you don't know what's going on in the home, like all you can really take is his word for it. And since like he drinks and he gets violent, I guess the darkness is in there, which is like unlocked by drinking, from what I can presume. So yeah, and then kidnaps his own therapist. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. The moment you kidnapped her and started acting extra creepy, it's just like, yeah, you lost her trust.
Good times. Well, not really, but yeah. Oh god. Yeah, I think that's about it, unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, go watch Backrooms and make your own opinion. Like I like that. I don't know if I'll watch it anytime soon, but like I'd pick up a sequel.
I think again, with Parsons at the helm, he could do some interesting things. And again, with the various amount of material that they could work with, they could again probably just cherry pick the bits that they like, but then forge their own path and do whatever they wanted with this. So yeah, yeah. If the audience demand is there and he feels like him and the studio could come up with something more with a sequel, yeah, I'd be down. So yeah, bring it on. So yeah, now I guess it's time to say goodbye. But before then, ladies and gents, just find us on those interwebs. The Hypersonic 55 can be found in most places via the name Hypersonic 55. The podcast is on those socials, primarily on Instagram and TikTok. And yeah, the podcast can be found primarily on YouTube and Spotify. And yeah, Vincent, if you could tell the lovely folks where they can find you.
All right, you can find me on Instagram at Vincent Trinita, and I write for onemore.game.ph. Next week, I'm going to Summer Game Fest. Woo! 4 years in a row, I guess. I've been going since 2023. Yeah, like it's going strong. It's the only constant in my life. LA in June. FIFA. Well, it'll end before FIFA starts, and I'll hide in my room for all our football fans in the audience. Go
You and me both,
Arsenal!
man.
I'm just saying.
Oh,
It's
God.
I think that's the football equivalent of go Pats, right? Because like every time I say go Pats, it sets off someone. So when you say go Arsenal, does it set off?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It'll set off your
Guys,
uncle.
oh, yeah. What a time. Oh god. Okay. Well, on that note, I guess we'll dip out for now. But thank you for listening, and until the next time, I guess I'll see you later.